This is the Small Town Big Talk Show, the only place where you can listen in on real-life conversations about the challenges and the joys of living in a small town. I'm your host, Rebecca Undum, and each week a guest will join me as we tackle one topic that more than likely we're all feeling or have thought about, but of course, no one wants to talk about. Let's chat. My guest on today's episode is Emily Kostopoulos. Yep, just like Uncle Jesse on Full House. Emily is the host of the Stand to Serve podcast, as well as the owner of The Local, which is a new co-working space in Sturgis, South Dakota. And I invited Emily on specifically to talk about how she came up with the idea for co-working in a town of 6,000 people. And we talked through her journey, some of the fears that she had starting it, and really for all of us that might have ideas like this for our small towns, how we too can get started. She is a gem, you guys. I can't wait to hear what you all think. Happy listening, friends. All right, so I am so excited to be sitting, actually looking at your pretty face today. You and I have talked on the phone just one time before, and I found you on Instagram.
Yeah, I feel like I found you.
Did you find me? I was actually just thinking about this. Let's tell our origin story.
I heard you on Marketing and Yoga Pants.
Oh, that's right. Shout out to our girl, Britt. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's awesome. And then you have a podcast. And so I kind of started creeping on you. And then was it just the podcast that I was like, we should talk? Or what made us actually pick up the phone? And, like, what made us schedule a phone visit?
Well, I had seen that you had a book, and I just opened this co-working space, and I was
okay.
Cool if she came here and did like a book reading or signing or something like that.
That's right. That's how we started. It's so funny because sometimes I can't remember how I actually came to meet people because I just feel like I've been following you forever now, right? So that's actually what we're going to talk about today is, so you know that I work predominantly with women in small towns. Mm-hmm. And you have started something in Sturgis, South Dakota, which is population roughly what?
6,000.
6,000. Okay. So, not a metropolis, but bigger than some of the small towns, like bigger than my small town, but still small. Let's be real. And you have started something that I actually think that what you're trying to build in Sturgis, South Dakota, and have built because you're sitting in your space, is kind of a next innovation thing that a lot of our small communities can look at. So kind of two things that I want to ask you about with it. First of all, tell us all about The Local when we get there, but it's this idea of creative placemaking. So I feel like co-working, which not a lot of people in small towns get. So I want to talk about that with you because that's something to overcome, but it's creative placemaking. So you've got empty buildings in small towns, right? This is a thing that a lot of us have, and thinking, what do we do with those small towns to make a creative use of space and create place? So that's actually a thing. It's called creative placemaking. And then you're also bringing people together and creating community. Like these are I'm totally passionate about these things. So take us like to the very beginning. And even if you want to start with how you got into this to begin with, what made you think this would work in Sturgis? Just kind of take us back to the brainchild part of the journey, because I think it's super fascinating.
Okay. Well, I'll try and be concise.
You don't even have to be concise. We've got time. You're good.
Okay. All right. Well, get a cup of coffee and we'll just dive in.
People should go ahead and pause it and go get your refill.
Yeah, there you go. So I grew up in San Diego. So I lived in a big town and I went to school in a big town and then I went into engineering, and my first job was in a smaller-ish town in Casper, Wyoming. I was in the oil field for a couple years, for 4 years. And then I got a job in the Black Hills of South Dakota, still in engineering. So I moved up here about 2.5 years ago. And I have always been someone who is a little logical and follows the money. Because money was always something, growing up that we didn't have a lot of. So I kind of made that decision that I wanted to follow that. So I moved up here, and I felt myself feeling pretty undervalued at work. And not having enough to do. And if you have that and you're someone who likes being busy and kind of wears that as a badge, you kind of dive into things outside of work. So I started all of these like side jobs, and I dove into the creative community in the Black Hills.
I was going to ask, do you want to share any of them? Like, what were some of the things you dabbled in?
Yeah. So photography and design are the things I still do them, but not kind of a little more narrowed scope on what I'm doing in that field. But so I just got very inspired in the Black Hills, and anyone who's been here, it's just like this magical little place that I feel like no one gives credit to. Like the physical surroundings are stunning. The like spiritual feeling here is amazing. The people that I've met here. And so when I started dabbling in all of these things, I had this like craving to connect with other creatives. So I looked if there was a Rising Tide Society, and there wasn't. So I started a Rising Tide Society here.
Very cool.
And I just felt instantly like I was a part of this community. And I just love that. So anyways, when I quit my job, I found myself missing the community of having a normal job, normal coworkers, and
people.
Yeah. I think I'm hopping all over the place.
No, you're fine. You're good.
I loved the freedom of being able to work from home, but I didn't totally love working from home for a couple of reasons. So first of all, I don't have great Wi-Fi. I live in the forest off of a dirt road. I don't have great self-service or internet. And I found myself driving to our big city, Rapid City, which is about an hour away from me, which is where our closest Target is. And we have a female co-working space there, or we did. It just shut down. So I found myself driving an hour to kind of get that sense of community, and that just got old pretty quick.
Right. Right.
And I think I just had this like inkling, like this little, just like a little buzz on my heart that maybe that's something I could do where I lived. And before that idea really came to fruition, the space is what came first.
Okay. So, cool.
The Sturgis, South Dakota is known for the motorcycle rally every year. And
I've been one time.
You've been to the rally?
Yeah. So I was in college. I just have to say this. One of my best friends from high school went to school out at Black Hill State. And so one summer, I was like, were we even old enough to drink? I don't think we were. I think I was like maybe 19, 20. And I spent a week out there with her, and it happened to be over the rally. And so did not like bike out there. I don't bike. It's not my jam at all. But what a crazy experience. I mean, yeah, the things we saw, we saw some really crazy things. It was really cool though. I can't even imagine what it's like to live. Is that why you live in the forest?
Well, I live in the forest because it's just so beautiful out here, and it just like it lights me up in a way I've never really experienced before.
Oh, that's really cool. I want to also just comment that I totally think you're right about the area that you live in.
Yeah,
I love where you live. It's so beautiful. Yeah. Okay. So Sturgis. Back to Sturgis. So I felt like you could do this in Sturgis.
Yeah, so Sturgis is a smaller community, 6,000, that during the rally it jumps to 500,000 people. So the whole
For real, Emily? That's how many people? I mean, I knew it was a lot, but
yeah,
holy Moses!
It's just like it doesn't even seem real. It is so bizarre.
Right.
So all the businesses in Sturgis are catered to that essentially. So there's a lot of buildings that sit empty on our main street all year round. And for 2 weeks out of the year, our vendors come in. So I had a gentleman that I worked with previously who owned commercial real estate across the Black Hills. And he told me about this space on Main Street. And that's kind of when the idea first started forming in my head of like, oh, a space on Main Street, interesting. And then I saw the space and then the price, I mean, for a building that sits empty all year round, like it's worth it for people to rent it out for cheap because it's, better than nothing. So
Right.
I think what came before that, the full idea is the building and the space, and then knowing that the price was right, So in terms of my initial investment, it's not something, so scary that if it doesn't work out, I'm, out buying a whole building or something.
Right. But it's still, this is still really noteworthy because you started out by saying that you had a predisposition to follow the money. And so how did you, seriously, how did you get over, not that you did get over that, because clearly you are in this to build a business from it, right? Like that it's not, the goal isn't just to be philanthropic to your community.
Right.
Right. It's a real business, but even if the amount of money, the investment was small, it just feels not at odds, but like there might've been some conflict for a super analytical person.
Oh, absolutely.
And you're an engineer by trade, right? So people like you are always my favorite to go, how did you do this? I'm not analytical. I can if it calls for it, but it's not where I prefer to live, So can you speak a little bit to that? So I'm taking you out on a tangent too, so I'll do that.
It's okay. I like tangents. And
okay, good.
I one thing to say is I don't think I'm actually if you take a personality test and it's you are, analytical and you should be an engineer, I'm not that. However, I got a full ride scholarship for volleyball to an engineering school. Okay. So it's I have always followed the money. Right. So I learned how to be analytical. In this creative space that I had, I learned those things that helped me become an engineer. But anyway, so yes, someone who's followed the money forever and ever. I think it was a very long internal transformation that I went through. Moving up here. What was that?
Don't you feel like you're still in it too? Oh, you're constantly transforming, but I love that. And that's, I think, the thing too. I just feel like anybody that's watching and has a spark of something in their heart or in their mind, and sometimes it takes a long time to develop into the person that you're going to need to be to bring your spark to make it a flame, right? It just takes time. So, okay, go. Your internal transformation, you felt it happening.
Well, and I think that's a really good point. So this first event that kind of was a catalyst for all of this, was last November. My husband got in a serious car accident and he walked away completely fine. Our dogs were with him. They're all fine. But looking at his vehicle, he flipped 4 times on black ice. And it just, it even gives me chills still talking about it. I've never had an experience like that really shook me into realizing how short life was. Mm-hmm. And that was the first time I started to recognize that I was just existing at my job, and I was existing there because it put money in my bank account. And it also kind of fueled my ego because even now I love being able to tell people that I worked at an underground laboratory in an old historic gold mine. That felt really good for my ego to say, but I would rush home and work on my side projects. So it's there was it was fueling my bank account, was fueling my ego, but it wasn't fueling the purpose and the soul inside of me at all. And Levi getting in that accident really was the start of it. So that happened in November, and I didn't quit my job until August. So that was a very long transformation, and the people that I met and the people that came into my life, and starting my podcast, I think the people I started talking to, I really needed to see that other people were doing the hard thing of being entrepreneurs and, taking the road less traveled and starting something from nothing, because that wasn't something, growing up, I had this very clear trajectory of you go to college, you get a degree, you get a master's, and you become an engineer, and then you retire someday. And it's as much as I would like to say I didn't need to see myself in other people, I needed to see it,
right.
I needed to see that it was possible to, take a leap.
Right. Oh, Emily, I think this is a good conversation. So a couple things I would like to ask about that kind of whole process. So you said the people you met were, the people that came into your space, you started a podcast. Were those cultivated by you intentionally? So I guess and the reason I asked that question is because I just refuse to believe in coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I want anybody, again, listening, I'm thinking about the woman that's got the thing on her heart, like whatever that thing is. And she's just like, I don't know how to do this. And maybe she's at her 9 to 5 and she knows that that's not where she wants to be. But, you know, do you feel like you nurtured your own internal transformation, and were you intentional about certain things to kind of bring those people into your life? Did you journal about, like, what was that process? What did that look like for you? Because I feel like I went through that too. And you also, I just want to say how beautiful it is that you're owning the fact that you were doing something because it fed your ego. It's not always easy for us to admit. But like, I was completely defined by the amount of money I made. Completely.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know? So to leave that and walk away and then like try to build or replace that. And finally, I'm at the point where I'm like, my worth isn't that. The number is not my worth, you know, but just to get to that place where you can confidently say like, oh, this is where I want to be and this is what I want to do. That's not an easy thing. And again, it's like this. You'll feel really good some days and not so awesome other days. But I want to know for you, while you were still at your job, were there things you were intentionally doing to kind of make that shift?
I think looking back on that time, while I was in it, it's kind of hard to explain, but while I was in it, I would have these things that would come, you know, little pokes on my heart, I guess, of like, there's no rising tide society here. You should start one. And, you know, my logical side was like, what are you doing? You have a full-time job, you have a husband, you have dogs, you have like, you know, you try and have a life. Why would you do that? But I did it anyway. And then I had this like little calling on my heart of like, I wanted to start a podcast and it wouldn't go away. And again, it's like, what are you doing? You don't have more room in your schedule, but I still did it. And I think what you said is so true, that I don't think that was coincidence. I think that was my inner wisdom, you know, helping me move towards something that mentally I wasn't quite ready to accept yet.
Right.
And I said yes to those things. Even though mentally it didn't really make sense to say yes to those. So if I had not started Rising Tide, if I had not started my podcast, there are so many people all of the people in my life right now, I would not have met and I would not have a relationship with right now. Like all of my best friends here, I've met either from being on my podcast or Rising Tide. Right. And so I do believe that I got there because I was able to say yes to something that maybe mentally I didn't quite understand how I was going to make it work.
I think that's a really powerful observation for yourself though. And I think we have all been given inner wisdom. We've all been given intuition. And I know for me, every time she would like pipe up, I assume my inner wisdom is female. I don't know what you think, but
I assume that too.
she would pop up and she'd be like, this is not who you are, you know, like you're better than this. And like, or even just like conserve in a more obvious way, you know, all of the things. And I think owning the fact that you said yes to things that mentally didn't seem logically the smart thing to do, because that's the other thing I'll tell you, I completely identified with being the smart girl. So I got on a plan, I worked my plan, I did the plan until I got to this point where I was like, this cannot seriously be what my life is going to be. I can't do this forever, you know, and I think then too, we have to say, you know, was the plan faulty, or have I just developed into, you know, and being honest about those things and then giving yourself the grace to change your mind. Because we get to change our minds about things, right? And like for you, it was a car accident, which that's a heck of a wake-up call, right? I think there tend to be things that snap us into perspective. My 5-month-old son got really sick and we took an ambulance ride with him. And he ended up fine, but I mean, I had to hold him in an ambulance, you know, for like a 2-hour drive. So that was kind of my thing too. And it was that moment where I said, I was in my full-time job too. So I just think that sometimes there's external things, but sometimes it is just like the little niggling thoughts and whispers. You call them heart pokes, which is also lovely. But really cool. And you listen to it instead of just saying like, this isn't smart.
Yeah.
Smart's
Absolutely.
not the way smart isn't necessarily what it takes to feel fulfilled and purposeful. So
Absolutely.
love it. Okay.
And
Then what?
something else that you said, that you were like, you've always defined yourself by the amount of money you make. Um, I absolutely resonate with that. And I recognized even now, and you pointed this out, like I'm still going through this transition of figuring this out, but I recognize that it's almost like mourning a loss of this identity that I used to associate with.
Right.
It's a lot to it's mourning a loss, and it's so hard. And there's no rule book on how you do that, but
no. And I don't think people talk about that yucky part of this transition enough.
yeah.
I think we tend to, well, again, it depends on where you're hanging out. Like I like to surround myself with people that are entrepreneurs, but we'll talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
Because you don't ever 100% figure it out. Because frankly, if you're successful, a whole new crop of stuff comes up. Like every threshold you hit where suddenly now you're hitting, like you're creating a new stretch goal or whatever that looks like for all of us, suddenly a whole different set of insecurities and uncertainties and doubts.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be willing to just like feel them and process through them. And I just don't think we talk about this specific leap enough, that the loss of identity,
mm-hmm.
And it's what does this say about me now kind of a thing, right? And it's really hard. It's really hard. So thank you for bringing it up. I love that you're sharing all of this.
Oh, well, you're asking good questions.
Well, I just love having conversations with people that I think are like kindred spirits. It's so much fun. Okay. So then what happened? You were at the point where I'll take it back. You're at the point where like you've got the building on lock. Like you know that the building makes a lot of sense, and it didn't feel like that big of an investment.
Yeah, right. That was another one that I think I just remember I was already starting on this process. I had signed my lease. I was buying furniture, and I met this person who was like, "Oh, let me see your business plan." And I was like, "What?" And I had completely followed what was feeling right internally on this. And so the thought of like writing everything down and going through the numbers, like it just wasn't even as important to me in this because it felt so right internally. And I just like had this internal like cheerleader that was popping in my head of like, give them Wi-Fi, they will come. Like that, like seriously, like came to me a lot. And it was scary because like there's a lot of things that come with bringing something new to a small town. And a lot of my marketing is education because a lot of people don't even know what a co-working space is. Oh, and even people who come in, they're like, people just have no idea. And it's something that I love about big towns and, growing up in San Diego, and I went to school right outside of Denver, and I've lived in New York, and like, I love all the amenities that are so readily available.
Right.
But I don't love living there. I love living here, and I still want some of those amenities. And one of them is like, I want a co-working space that I can go have reliable internet, have a professional place that I can go to when I need it. Like, yes, I still want to have like PJ day where I work from home, but if I want to meet a client, I don't, when I first started recording my podcast, I had people come into my house, and it's like, and that's fine, but it's like that awkward, like, here, can you step over my dog real quick? Like, and we'll go upstairs. And it's just, I was craving having a place that I could go.
Right.
That was separate from where I lived. It was a nice meeting place for people. And I also was craving a place where I could go and I could see other people working. And that just, I didn't want to drive an hour to get to it. So anyways, some things started falling into place, but there was a lot of work involved, of course, too. But
right.
I think looking back on it, I chose to kind of let the easy things fall into place and see what happened next.
Sure. So what you have created right there, like I'm telling you, if you and I lived closer than 6.5 or so hours apart, because you're quite far away from me, what you have created is exactly what I yearn for. It's exactly what I want here. And the only difference for you and me is that we have very good internet. So like working from home is totally doable, but it's all the other things. I love bringing together true entrepreneurs like that. And you use the phrase built something from nothing. I just, like it's you and your raw talent or your passion or whatever it is, and you built something from it. Mm-hmm. I don't even care what it is that people make or build or create. I just love working with people that have that spirit in them. And that's largely what we would attract to a space like that. So I think about your space often. And what I also love, just to speak to your spirit, and what I think is really important for all of us in small towns, you didn't wait for somebody else to do it. You said, I want this, so I'm going to figure out how to make it happen. And man, if that's not inspiring, you're like blowing my mind today, Emily. I'm just thinking about, what would happen if more of us, instead of kind of bitching and complaining, which is really easy to do, to say, oh, God, well, our town doesn't have this and it doesn't have that. Well, what if you figured out a way to make it happen? Mm-hmm. So it's just super, super cool. So, so you've been you opened the local in January, right?
Yep.
So talk to me a little bit about what has been overall the biggest challenge, and maybe speak a little bit more about the education that you've been doing. Has there been anything about kind of marketing this space that's been truly surprising to you? Or like, what's the education that you feel people need the most? Because that's something that I think is kind of fascinating too. Because it's like a brand new concept to certain people.
Yeah. This is still new to me. I think what's surprising to me is the people that I think this is a home run for, and it's not.
Yep.
But then there's people like I can, think of like half of my members who signed up that I'm like, really? And it's like, it's been such a nice little surprise of thinking that I know who's going to be attracted to this, and then realizing I have no idea,
Right. Right.
So another thing that's been really exciting about this process is, so during the day, I want it to be co-working, but because I'm in a small town, I think I needed more to this, not just like, I don't think you can just plop a WeWork here and it, be successful. So That's why I added the component of like networking. So my smaller membership is solely basically, encouraging people to invest in their professional and personal growth and development, through showing up to events that maybe they wouldn't normally come to, and surrounding themselves with new people. Because I really believe that's how you grow, is getting out of your comfort zone and thinking maybe a little bit differently and going and talking to someone that you wouldn't normally talk to.
Right.
So that has been a fun component of this for me, is like thinking of events that don't exist here. And I'm in this position where it's like, I want these events, so I'm going to bring them to me. So like
you have an event venue just built into your business, which is so cool. This is what I want to see, and I'm not waiting for someone else to do it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a spirit that I hope this episode can seriously foster and ignite and encourage in other people, because we spend way too much time waiting for someone else to take action on some of these things. What pieces do you feel like, has there been anything that you're surprised by how little people actually get about it?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So the other day, this weekend, there was a local wedding photographer. She rented out the event to do a bridal boot camp, and she had 30 brides in here, and it was amazing. She was killing it. And that's the other thing I love about this space, is that I want it to be a space that is creative and I feel inspired in, but I want it to also be able to like mold and shift a little bit to support other people's creativity. Yeah. So like this event was perfect for it. Like, she's a dear friend of mine, and I was like, girl, you need to do a workshop. You're so good in front of people. And this space transformed into her space. And I thought that was so amazing. But anyway, so there's all these people in here, and I am overhearing conversations, and this one woman was like, oh, is this just normally a coffee shop? Like, people just don't really understand the, that there could be a space that is solely for people to just come work and get out of their house. And,
Right.
and I think it's because a lot of, and there's a lot of people in this area. And I know we talked about this before, that work remotely. And so maybe they don't own their own business, but they work for a bigger corporation, but their family is here. And having a space where you can still like just get out of your house a little bit. I feel like I get cabin fever if I'm home too much. Like I need to get out.
Me too.
And when people have something for free at their home, like there's a lot of education involved in, showing them that you don't have to buy an office space, but you could share this office space with everyone else,
Right.
And it's just been interesting to figure out how I can describe that in a way that people see the value. I think especially in this digital world, we want to undermine how important in-person community is.
Mm-hmm.
It is so, it gives me chills saying that, because it's so, as much as I love these conversations, in person is still so important, and we just need to prioritize it.
Right. And I would say I 100% fall into that camp, because like now, this is how I have a lot of conversations. It's how I work with clients. It's how I talk to people on the talk show. And I love it. I'm so thankful for it. But it never replaces face-to-face collaboration and events when they're done well and they collaborative, man, there's just nothing like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I have to say, like, just to give an example, I was thinking about this. So there's a girl who reached out to me that was doing like a mobile canvas to paint thing. And she wanted to do something in here. And I was like, sure, great. Like I had heard amazing things about this girl, and she showed me what it was. And it was like a llama. And in my snooty mind, I'm like, I'm creative. I don't need to like go to a llama painting class. But I went anyway. And it's not about the product of what you're making, or it's not even about the event itself. It's not about like, I'm going to do a bar class, or I'm going to paint a llama, or it's not about that. It's about the people that I was able to meet in the process. It's about the creative experience, the learning something new, the creative expression. Like that component of it it's just, it's life-giving. It changes everything.
Amen. And so to that point as well, I think and this was kind of Marlene and I on this week's episode talked about this just a little bit, that we get really prejudgmental about what events we think are for us, or what groups are for us, or what people are for us. Mm-hmm. And left and right, we are missing opportunities to just expand. That's actually, and when we were talking about it, I was like, that's actually what I want to help all of us do, is just be more expansive, even in these small communities that we all live in, because it is possible. If this stuff comes to your back door, like if it comes right to your community, just try it out. Like, and I think sometimes we just get so cozy and comfy, and what that really means is complacent, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, I love that. Love that. Yeah. So any kind of final, I guess, thoughts for the woman that might be watching this?
I think there's so much opportunity in small towns, and I recognize, coming from bigger towns, that small towns are just very underserved with some of these other cool things. Right. And it's like, but there's still super rad people living in these small towns that want these super rad things. And maybe we're just getting to the point that if you want something rad, you have to bring it yourself. You have to like be the rad, maybe. Yeah. Right. You have to be the rad. I love this though, because I think, and I'm going to reiterate that because again, what you are showing us is that if you want something bad enough and you choose to step out and bring it, that it fulfills more than just, it's not self-indulgent. I like I was saying, I can see where sometimes you maybe feel like, I'm doing this for me, but you know full well that if you want it, other people probably want it too. So the encouragement to not wait around for somebody else to do it. And then secondly, again, that just gentle nudge for all of us to step out and do something that maybe doesn't feel 100% cozy all the time,
because we don't grow when we stay cozy.
Yes.
It feels good, but it isn't really, it's not expansive. And that's really the choice we have with every single thing that comes our way, right? We can take the easy route, which will be staying kind of small and complacent, or we can say what would push me a little bit and maybe be a little uncomfy, but it would be a broadening of some horizon, right?
Have you read any of Michael Singer's books, like Surrender Experiment?
No, I haven't. I know who he is. I follow him kind of, but I've never read any of his books.
So this book I'm reading right now, his whole thing is basically like surrender to the opportunities that come to your doorstep. Kind of
What's it called? It's called The Surrender Experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Totally written.
He gives this example of like, he had this property and he went away for a couple months and he comes back and some woman was building a home on his property. And his like ego is like, what are you doing? And so he went and he like meditated for a little bit, and he's a very like meditative person. Like that's very clear. And
he was on The Secret, right? Was he not?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Michael Singer was on The Secret.
Yeah.
So manifestation and that whole like law of attraction stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So he went back and he thought about it and he was like, my internal wisdom says if this woman shows up, there's a reason that she is here and there's a reason that this is supposed to unfold. But my personal preference is like, get off of my property. And he basically had to surrender to say like, I don't want to be fueled by my personal preference or my ego. I want to be fueled by this internal wisdom. And then of course he tells a story about how they get very close and they create this big thing together. And it's like, all of these things come from him basically saying like, even though this doesn't seem like my perfect situation or my ideal, like I don't want this, but it's here and I'm going to surrender to it and see what life is trying to teach me. And it led to something amazing. And I'm trying to live my days like that. And it's hard, but I mean, what a beautiful way to live. If you can.
I am so grateful to you for sharing that. I cannot wait to read that book because that's 100%. That is how I want to live as well. And man, is it hard.
It is.
Because I am driven by my ego a lot of the time. And I'm seriously going to file that away, and I'm probably going to talk about it like today or somewhere. I don't know where, maybe Instagram stories or something, that you and I had this conversation. And that this idea of this isn't my personal preference. Like just to remember that, like, well, isn't that life? Like we don't get to orchestrate every single thing that happens. Clearly, this isn't what I would choose, but I'm standing in front of it, right? And now what am I going to do to it or with it, And surrendering is something that I really struggle with because I'm a control freak by nature. So here I am running around trying to tidily order every little thing that happens to me. It never works. I get frustrated. I don't get what I want, I mean, I know that that's not an expansive way to live at all. So thank you for that. And I think that's it. I mean, that's a great kind of lasting thought for everybody. Is just, there are definitely going to be things about living in a small town that are frustrating and annoying and, maybe make you feel like you're being held back or confined in some way. But it only has to look like that if that's how we choose to see it. Yes. There's actually an opportunity in every single challenge that we face.
Well said.
Thank you so much, Emily. It was an awesome conversation. I can't wait to hear what people think about this.
Yes.
And best of luck to you at the local in Sturgis, South Dakota.
Thank you.
Do you ever look around your small town and feel like there's zero inspiration to be found? Well, I can totally relate to that. And yet I really, truly believe that the best way to stay inspired is by choosing to find little, easy ways to get those hits of inspiration. And that's why there's a whole section in the Small Town Survival Kit that includes wallpaper that I created with motivational, inspirational messages on them, including the books, the apps I use, and the podcasts that I listen to that make me feel like I'm not so small just because of my small environment. So grab the link and get your copy because it really is all about the little things.